Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Today we're going to be talking about the big update coming for Star Wars Armada in October from Atomic Mass Games, and we're going to kind of weigh some of the pros and cons that come with, well, frankly, AMG doing anything else to Star Wars Armada, considering that they've already said that the game is ending development and there's no more production of it, and the game is pretty much sunsetting. Having one final content release for Star Wars Armada is potentially exciting, but also potentially very troubling. And I thought I'd run over a couple of examples in ways that could potentially be good or could potentially be bad. And I also want to get some of your feedback and just kind of keep the discussion going on it because, frankly, there hasn't been a whole lot of Star Wars Armada content to talk about over the last couple of years. And as you know, it is one of my favorite games. It is my all-time favorite game. And I love to continue to keep talking about Star Wars Armada. So that's what we're doing today. If you guys are new here and you do enjoy Star Wars and tabletop gaming, you're in the right place. Hopefully you stick around, click that subscribe button, click the bell for alerts. We are also doing a $25 Amazon gift card, so if you want to have a chance to enter to win that, you just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. So, pros and cons for an October Armada update. I think honestly, the obvious pros and cons are going to be along the lines of, well, it's awesome that they're doing something, but it's also terrible that they might break the game because Armada has been in one of the best states that I think it's been in ever. There have been a lot of balance fixes. There have been some new cards added that have changed up the game a little bit more, and people are still playing it despite the lack of any expansions for several years now. And it's doing quite well. So, what could they do to really improve? And are they in a position to actually improve the game? Especially, why, when you've already said, all right, the game is done, we're done with it, it's going away, it's a dead game or what have you. People are calling it that. So why bother doing one final push? And, that is certainly something that Fantasy Flight games used to do. Whenever they would sunset a game, there would usually be, one more final push of, one final expansion or something, something of consequence. And usually it was a good, meaningful kind of send-off. And they didn't do that for Armada or X-Wing. It was just basically one little Twitter post that's just like, oh, by the way, these games are done. And you probably already knew that because we pulled all the stock off of our website a couple weeks ago, leaving you wondering what the heck was going on and refusing to talk about it. So it's been very unceremonious. It's been very kind of brash and sudden and abrupt and just, kind of distasteful from my perspective, the way they've kind of handled Armada as well as X-Wing. But so it really kind of begs the question, why do one more push? And of course, a lot of people are afraid because they have done, rules changes to other games. And if you look at what they did to Star Wars X-Wing, there's definitely a lot of concern because the changes were so severe and drastic that they split the community directly in half. And of course, that is the biggest fear, is that they will completely torpedo this game as a big middle finger to everybody on the way out. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but that is certainly one of the cons, and that's why I'm including it in this video. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom here because there's definitely pros that come along with this, but I'm not going to lie and say that I'm not concerned that there could be bad things. Now, there is also a safety net if there is bad things as well, so we'll talk about that. Let's talk about the three different things they could do. Points, another rapid reinforcements, or basically new content, or rules. Could be any of those, or could be a combination thereof. So we'll talk about all of those. But I also want to let you guys know that there's an Armada rule set collective called ARC that is kind of a community come together sort of thing that is going to, try to be the custodians of the Armada rule set going beyond Worlds 2025. And if they do manage to break the game, there's definitely a community initiative of folks who will say, no, So it's not that there's not a safety net here, just in case. So that is definitely a mitigation against the worst case scenario. But let's talk about points first. This could go multiple ways. Now, points are very exciting because even a few changes of key cards having points adjustments could tremendously change the game. If you there's a lot of commanders that are not point costed correctly. There's some commanders that are too cheap, and there's some commanders that are way too expensive. And so, I think that's an easy way to hit points. But then there's certain upgrades that are well undercosted. PDICs, for example, are highly undercosted. I probably need a completely balance change or rework. I don't know if they'll do errata along with any points changes. I feel like errata is something that's better left towards Arc in the future. But points have their own built-in hit or miss. If the points adjustments are gradual and limited in scope, then they can go a very long way towards setting a new meta for the next year and carrying us through Worlds 2025 and into the season building for 2026. So, a slight points update could be massively huge and incredibly powerful for Star Wars Armada. The fear there, though, the worst case scenario is that they go overboard and that they hit maybe some things correctly and then some things, crazy wrong, and then it has some people saying we're going to throw out everything, and it has some people saying no, we like these points, and it has a whole third faction of people saying no, we like some of these points but we don't like other ones, and then that faction splits off and everybody playing by their own rules. And that's really the worst case scenario, is that people are divided over it. So I hope if they do points changes, and I think that's probably the most likely thing, that they are very measured and not too aggressive, and lean a little bit lighter on the how many, like maybe not everything needs a points update. Hopefully it's, a very, very measured and relatively smaller amount of cards, but impactful, like maybe 3 or 4 things tops per faction. I think would be kind of a good way to start. And then, because we have Arc that could potentially deal with this in the future, and there's stuff like that out there. Another thing that they could potentially do is another Rapid Reinforcements. We could get a Rapid Reinforcements 3. I think this one is maybe a little bit less than likely. There's obvious cons. I'm going to start about the cons first. The obvious risk of another Rapid Reinforcement style content drop is that we get another Anakin Skywalker situation, and that's basically where we get one card that completely breaks the game, or more than one card that completely breaks the game, and it's either way too overpowered, breaks all kinds of tech, or is so good or undercosted that it becomes like you have to take this card. But there's also positives to another Rapid Reinforcements 3, because it means we could get meaningful cards. It means that we could get new content to spice things up. It could be the opportunity to bring in some kind of separatist commander that interfaces with squadrons or gives bombers some kind of bonus. It could be the way to get Republic squadrons with assault. It could be the way to get separatist squadrons with adept. It could be the way to get a Republic Architans or any other of these things that a lot of people really want, or maybe certain cards that would fill technical voids in the rule set and in the way that tech and card synergies seemed to indicate that they were heading towards. So a Rapid Reinforcements, we could potentially deliver really cool options like that, and that would be really cool. But that one definitely has its pros and cons if they're going to do something like that. The third option could be that they do a rules update, and this is one of the scariest things, because if we look at the way that they've handled rules for other games, I'm definitely worried about it, because frankly there's some big cons, there's some big fears right away. One of the things I would expect them to do is to deal with the whole beginning of the game, like remove bids and you randomize who the first player is going to be. They've done that in every game that they've taken over from Fantasy Flight so far, and so if they touch the rules for Armada, I would definitely expect that to be the very first thing on the chopping block. Bids are gone. Every player, goes all the way up to 400 now, and were you planning on hoping to have a 30+ point bid so you could get second player? Sorry, it's going to be randomized now. And if they randomize who's first player and second player, then that is going to put a whole lot of builds in a state, a whole lot of lists, and a whole lot of ways to play the game as non-viable anymore, because there's a lot of lists that need to be second player. I personally don't usually run those builds. I don't need to be first or second player. I usually run fleets that don't care if they're first or second player. They have ways to deal with both situations. However, that's my choice to play that way. And I know a lot of players definitely either at least heavily prefer one versus the other, and some absolutely depend on it, making it absolutely critical that they win that bid. And I've seen people come in with like 40 plus point bids before because they have to be first or second player. And so, like, again, that's a rules change that might not seem like a big deal from AMG's end, but it like completely transforms the game into a completely different system where so many. And this is more on the competitive side of the house, but this would transform competitive Armada into more of a casual game, and I think that would be a problem because it's the competitive play that is going to keep Armada showing up at Worlds and Adepticon and things like that. Now, I love to play both competitively and casually, and I usually kind of do a hybrid of both. You'll see me at a tournament and I'll be playing casually, but I'll still be competing. So it's a weird thing, but. So there's definitely there's a risk of things that they'll do like that, or other rules changes that could potentially really cripple the game. What if they were to say, for example, now squadrons can always move and attack whether or not they're given a squadron command token or something like that, or whatever. I don't know. I could imagine and spitball things all day, but there could be things where maybe they sat down and played a game of Armada and said, man, I just got destroyed by this guy. Let me change all the rules so that the advantages that player had over me, they no longer have. That would certainly mirror a lot of what they did in Star Wars X-Wing, whereas they took like gripes from one small select community and assumed that those were the gripes that the entire community had when it wasn't really the case. Like comparing X-Wing to a game of tower defense or something like that, which was really weird. So let's hope that they don't do anything too crazy. Now, there's also pros to possible rules changes. There's certain rules changes I think would make a ton of sense, ranging from everything from being able to salvo an ignition attack, which, again, there's no reason that you shouldn't be able to salvo an ignition attack, provided you're in range to make a salvo attack as per usual. Like that one just makes sense. Everybody I've never met anyone who says, no, you should never be able to salvo attacks. Like that. I've never met anybody that agrees with that rule. It's just a ruling that seemed like it was put in to remind people that ignition attacks could happen from beyond long range. So to remind people that extreme range doesn't give you a free salvo. Well, I think, we've all got that now. We don't need that, this artificial rule. So that makes sense, especially when salvo attacks, or ignition attacks can happen at close range. Why can't I salvo you? You're right next to me. I can't hit you. You're invisible. So it's a weird thing. And other like weird rules, things like, for example, the invisible hand title with its donut deployment. Like you can only deploy the squadrons at range 3, but not at range 2 or 4, but like only within this narrow band. And that was a kind of like, the rules as written. Whoops, it actually says it this way. That should be like a simple like, at can be up to or something like that. Might be a very simple rules change that could help, or at least errata that one card to make it a little bit more, common sense. There are certain common sense rules changes I think that could go a long way. And so that could be a good thing for Star Wars Armada. Other tournament things too, like I know a while back there's been some people that said, should we speed up squadron play, like triangulating, using 2 tools at the same time to be able to measure. I need to make sure Howl Runner's range 1 of all of these guys, and and I need to be able to move all this stuff. And I know at least in my games we try to communicate what they're trying to do, and I'll help you do it. I don't really care if you want to use 2 tools or not to measure more precisely, because it speeds up the game, and it's the difference between a game making it within its time limit versus a squadron heavy game going 4 or 5 hours if it were going to go to completion. And of course, if you're in a tournament, you won't have that option. So do you really want a game to wrap up on turn 3 or 4 when it should have gone 6 turns? That's kind of a problem, especially with really heavy hull ships like the Starhawk, that if you don't have 6 turns of shooting, you may not kill it. So if if your opponent's slow playing, and there could be some really weird rules changes too. So what's the worst case for the rules changes? Obviously, one of the fears is that they put in a terrible rules change. Well, we have the Armada rule set collective that might say, you know what, that's fine. We're not going to support that moving forward. So guys, don't worry about it. We'll rescind that as we take the game, after AMG kind of no longer runs events. This will be the new standard. The problem is, and I think the worst case scenario is, what if they come up with a ruling that's so controversial that it splits the community in half? And if the Armada rule set collective were to say, all right, we're going to throw that out, half the players say, well, no, I like that rule, and then you have splintering factions. That's what I think is really the worst case scenario here. Hypothetical scenario, what if they were to say, okay, well, slow play is a problem, so we're going to put in tournament clocks, so you have to have, each person gets like 1 hour of game time, and you have to hit the clock. I know, I don't think they'll actually do that, because who's going to provide the clocks, and it becomes a huge tournament expense, and it becomes a logistical nightmare. Where are you going to get all these clocks from, and all that sort of thing, like chess clocks. But that's been a topic that is heavily debated, and some people are massively in favor of it, and some people aren't, because it's very tricky to be able to rule on slow play. And again, also, you don't kind of want to call somebody over. If you a lot of times people won't want to call a judge because they think their opponent is slow playing, because am I just going to sound like a jerk? Am I just trying to sound like somebody who's trying to win at all costs? And so I know when I've had people slow play against me, I usually never call a judge. I'm just like, really? You want to win that badly that you're going to stall me out? Fine, you can just have the win. It's like that's a shame that you're ruining the game, but I don't want to be a jerk, and maybe I should call a judge, but I don't. I don't like the idea of calling a judge, because to me it's like, it's a weird situation. I'm not comfortable doing that, and so a clock would alleviate that for me. But I could see that being one of those rules that splits the community in half, where some people want to do it, some people don't. That, I think, is one of the worst things, because there's any extremely divisive rules change is going to leave the community in a rough spot. And that's kind of, if we look at where X-Wing is at, X-Wing has 2 communities right now. They have the 2.5, and then they have the 2.0 Legacy. Because when AMG put out their X-Wing rules change, the community was split down the middle. Some people were like, oh, I love these changes, but a lot of people were like, we hate these changes. And then some people were like, I hate these changes, but I'll still play them. And so that's I personally hated the AMG X-Wing rules changes. I think I hated almost all of them. There's, I think, only maybe 1 or 2 that were kind of okay. So yeah, it was a rough time for me. So the 2.0 X-Wing Legacy is kind of the the preferred community for me, but it's not the the only community. So it's now all of a sudden you have this game that's already got its splinter cells, and Armada hasn't had that yet. And my fear is that they do something like that to the Armada rule set that splits the community in half, and then in some communities have few enough players as it is. That's kind of one of those things that I worry about. So I think the important thing is that we stay united and we stay as one group. And that's an important thing. So splinter factions and splinter cells are always going to be a problem. We need to make sure we're playing with Star Wars Armada. We're using the same rule set. We're using the same points. We're using the same ships. We're using the same cards. And that we're using the same stuff. Now, obviously, at some point, people are going to have to get 3D printed things and stuff like that, and that's fine. But I don't want to. I'd hate to see the game kind of devolve into that place where we show up to, we show up to the game store on Sunday and everybody's got their own version of Armada. Oh, I'm playing Armada with, the Heir to the Empire stuff, and I'm playing Armada with, Spaceballs and Mega Maid, even though that would look really cool, so. It would be rough if that were to happen. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But that's just some of my thoughts. Let's keep the discussion going. You can jump in our Discord. You can let me know down in the comments section. Check out social media. There's our great Armada Facebook group you can join. Lots of Armada ways to connect and talk about the game. And I want to thank you guys for hanging out. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are out of this world and help make this whole channel possible. I will talk to you later. May the Force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes. So say we all. And always wash your socks.